Welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar hosted by the Organization Development and Change program at Penn State. Today, we have the great pleasure of welcoming our presenter, George Karam. My name is Layla Farzam, and I am the Alumni Ambassador for the Organization Development and Change program at Penn State. We also have Jenny Lee with us today, who will be managing our chat and Q&A features. In terms of the interactive format for this webinar, please open the chat feature in the Zoom platform to interact and ask questions for the Q&A segment. If for some reason you get disconnected from our presentation, please use the same Zoom link to re-enter. Our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change can help you prepare to implement quality and continuous improvement initiatives in an organization. Furthermore, there's a PhD program in workforce education and development with a concentration in human resource development and organization development. Our program has created a continuous monthly webinar series from experts around the world. Today, we welcome George.
George Karam is an executive and board member with 32 years of experience and interest in human, organization, and society development. He currently is the managing partner for Korn Ferry, previously Hay Group, in the Middle East and North Africa. George has also worked for 14 years at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., in several management roles, namely in compensation, benefits, insurance, and pension, in addition to human resource management. George is a member of an advisory council human resource management program at Alliance School of Business at the American University of Beirut, and a member of advisory board of Embrace, an NGO dedicated to mental health. He is a regular speaker on key subjects related to organization and people effectiveness. He is fluent in English, French, and Arabic, and he's also passionate about family, travel, history, and the future. Here's George Karam.
Well, thank you very much for this very generous introduction, and thank you very much for hosting me. I'm very flattered. I'm going to share my screen and go through the presentation. So welcome to panelists and to all attendees. So it will take me a second so I can figure out something very quickly and hopefully share my screen with you all. All right, this seems to be working. So let's get started. Here's how I'd like to start this. So first of all, thank you for coming to this webinar. And many of you may be wondering, what is that title, the turn? Why do I want to accelerate through the turn? What this guy is going to talk about? I like my pace. So what's the acceleration? It's a strange title, perhaps. But
sorry, George, we don't see your full screen. So would you mind sharing the full screen? We can see the your notes.
Okay, so let me switch somehow.
Thank you.
Thank you. You see it now?
Yes, perfect.
All right, and let me try to. No, this is bad again, no? Is this working, Jenny?
It worked. You're on mute, George.
I don't know what's going on here. So let's try to roll with this as it is. Now you can see me, you can hear me, I assume. So the title is a little bit strange, huh? Accelerating through the turn, because it's very important for us today at this junction to start really thinking about what's going to happen next. where is our world going? And we believe in our research, working with our clients, that the best way to prepare for what's coming next is to enable our organization have a highly performing workforce. I'm going to try to shift gears here and do a little bit of introductions. I think just in addition to what Jenny has just said, I think it's important that I introduce my company. Korn Ferry is a global organization and people consulting firm. We are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We are all over the world. And for what we do, for that line of specialization, we are the best. And I think the largest. This session is interesting in a sense. I tried to bring a blend of statistics, data, things that would interest some of the audience, but also some learnings that you can take with you to your organization or to your field of study and work with it in a way that it could hopefully be helpful. We'll conclude with a maybe 10, 15 minutes on Q&As. So pause for a second and think, what's really going on? There are two things today we need to be careful about. There's a short-term play and a longer-term play. And again, we're talking about the realm of people and management. Change is happening. Change happens all the time. It's not a choice. Technology changes the way we do things. Generational traits and preferences. I know, speaking to colleagues, speaking to young graduates who join our organization, speaking to my own daughter, I hear a lot about that compact, that relationship between employee and employer, and how the new generation think of that. We hear a lot about the global talent crunch. Are there enough people, enough skills, enough leaders ready for the future of work? COVID-19 has accelerated a little bit that thinking. There's the human, physical, mental devastation that we're going through, the economy that's gone badly, but will decline and then rebound. But something else has happened. The ways we work, the ways organizations want people to work, not only that they're working remotely, they're exploring new technologies, not limited to meeting through Zoom or anything like that, but the work, the jobs have been redesigned. Empowerment is greater. Enablement, trust, all of these issues companies are struggling with to be able to get ready to the future. So no matter where you sit today, organizationally or individually, you got to think about how and with what actions you will accelerate through the turn. You got to think about it this way, because different people are in different stages today. Different organizations are different stages. And the minute things start getting better, some people will do better than others. Some organizations will do better than others. Some are fighting some organizations are fighting to survive now, but some are sitting there thinking about how they can disrupt their industry and do better when they can accelerate through the turn. So let me talk a little bit about the global talent crunch. The question I pose to you, are there enough skilled people and effective leader for the future of work? Here's what our study shows. Evidently not. This is what we refer to as a global talent crunch. In 2020, this year alone, 3% of labor deficit. That's not the most important point. The most important point is in 2025, it will double to 6%. In 2030, and that's not very long from today, very far from today, it will go to 11%. So it's almost doubling, if not doubling, every year. What does that mean? A global talent crunch. I'm going to ask you two questions on which I'd like to see your answers. Question number one, well, on your screen, the global labor shortage in 2030 will be close to what number, in your opinion? And the economic impact of that shortage in 2030 will be of what magnitude, in your view? Please vote. Let's see the results. $85 million is the winner on the labor shortage, and $100 billion on the economic impact. Actually, you're not far off. 85.2 million workers will be needed, or skills, or full-time equivalent, no matter how you want to look at it, will be needed to fill that gap. And the loss of economic output or unrealized output would be up to $8.5 trillion. $8.5 trillion is the GDP of Germany and France and the UK combined. It's a huge number. And this is not only, we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail, this is not only a problem, but it's a problem that if we do not start to deal with at this point in time, 10 years ahead of time, it will become even bigger beyond 2030. So let's look a little bit at the number. So in 2020, you see in yellow, the deficit is somewhere between 0 and 6 million. The US, you see it in yellow. You look at 2030, the US now is in red, a significant deficit. It will double in terms of skill shortages. Same thing for Brazil, the largest country. We focused here on 20 large countries in our analysis. When you get the recording and some material, you can see some of the details, which we don't have time to visit today. But what you will find in 2030 is that only one country will be in the blue, and that's India. Only one country with a larger or a surplus of talent to fill the gap. You look at it into a little bit more detail, and you find that the financial and business services sector will be the most disturbed, the most hit. In 2030, you're going to find a lot more red than the chart I showed you a little bit earlier. Again, with India sticking out in blue as with a little bit of a surplus. But the acute deficit is going to be in the Americas, in Japan. And that labor shortage is we estimate it to be at 10.7 million workers with unrealized output of 1.3 trillion US dollars. It's pretty bad. If you look at other sectors, technology, media, and telecoms, I'm not going to cover all the sectors, but at least give you a couple of them. Perhaps it's not that bad that we will not be getting any acute deficit as in the financial and business services, but still a lot of orange and a lot of yellow. So most will have a deficit and a significant deficit, so to speak. Labor skills shortage of 4.26 million workers and unrealized output of $450 billion by 2030. So I think this is important for you to see how much the shortage of skill will affect the economy. The Americas, as I said, will suffer the most. Labor skills shortage, 23.9 million, unrealized output, 2.3 trillion in 2030. I'm not gonna bore you with too much statistics. I want to save a good chunk of the session to talk about other things that are also important, so you can do something with it. The Europe, Middle East, and Africa will also suffer a labor skill shortage, 14 million, with unrealized output of 1.9 trillion US dollars. No matter where you look at it, the Asia Pacific, the same, with the exception of India, with severe or acute deficit in Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, so on and so forth. So you got to be really looking in your thinking about people, in your thinking about organization, at what the actions that we could be making today can, and how these actions can impact the future. So the talent tomorrow is a shortage of skills rather than only a shortage of number of people. The number of people is just out there. Are these people equipped as individuals and groups and as leaders to carry us into the future? So for me, this is an alarm bell as to what organizations, universities, governments need to start looking into to be able to narrow that gap going into the future. This study was released very shortly before COVID-19 pandemic, days before. So imagine now how much the COVID crisis has impacted this. So again, organizations, governments, societies, individuals, students cannot just sit still and try to figure things out in the future. Another poll question quickly. What do you feel about this topic? Serious, alarming, or just interesting, but wondering what you can do about it? What do you think? Jenny, when you have some results, please share. Wow, serious and alarming. More than half the people think it's serious and alarming. You know, it is in a way serious and alarming because something's got to be done about it. Frankly, most of our business is shifting in that direction now. Our companies sit and talk with us about, well, what can we start doing to be able to turn that corner fast or accelerate through the turn, as we have labeled that session. So the talent crunch, the pandemic, are two plays, a short and a longer term play. Your mission as professionals, your mission as students, no matter who's attending this, is to start thinking about how can we accelerate from this. Our advice to our clients globally is to think in three different categories, so to speak. While the crisis have been challenging, I mean, both are challenging, but we have seen a lot of agility, decisiveness, collaboration flourish in organizations. The trick now is how do we transform organizations and embed in these organizations some of these behaviors that will allow them to thrive. Two, very important, the threats of the pandemic, the talent crunch that's looming, basically tell us that employees of the future are going to be different. Their skills are going to be different, so on and so forth. How do we transform? How do we think about the workforce and transform it so it can sustain the blow, A, B, again, accelerate through the turn. I keep using that line. For some reason, I like it. Thirdly, how do we future-proof the leaders? These times have been really very strong tests in disruptive leadership. Some new types of leaders have emerged, but how can organizations take these leaders and really propel them to positions where they can lead into the future? Because it's not sure, it's not certain anymore that the good leaders of the past or the profiles of leaders of the past are the ones that will take us into the future. So in these three categories, so to speak, companies will need to decide and act in uncertain conditions. And this is a very important point to make. A lot of clients come to us and say, well, should we wait? I mean, do we wait until things settle down and then we do something about it? I don't think anyone can afford to wait. You got to think about when you get to that turn, how do you come out of it first? Not first, second, or third, but you got to think about how to come out of it and come out of it fast. Because as I said a little bit earlier, some organizations are fighting for their survivals. And those need to get to that turn with some decisions that could be anything from an exit strategy. I'm not going to take that turn. I'm out of business. I can't survive. I'm going to sell. I'm going to shut down or whatever. Some are planning to rebound, taking all these necessary actions we talk about, and we will be talking about in the next few minutes, to be able to get to that turn and do well. And like I said a little earlier, some are really looking for an opportunity. especially those who have a good financial position, they have a creative workforce. Ambitious leaders are thinking, well, how do I take advantage of the situation? I don't want to just rebound and be what I used to be before and keep chugging along. How do I take advantage of this? And the good companies are the ones that have leaders that will take decisions in uncertain times. We can't change anything about uncertain times. Therefore, we got to transform so we can perform, shape the workforce of the future, and future-proof the leaders. I'll talk a little bit in a very simplistic way on what realignment or what transforming to perform means. Most companies we work with, and we're talking about a lot of companies in the thousands, have multiple strategies, a vision, a mission, several strategies, a lot of ambition, and most of the time they have become misaligned, so to speak. Their purpose is not aligned to their business priorities, or vice versa. But their capabilities, most importantly, are not aligned to what they need to be doing. In other words, they don't have the right people, they don't have the right skills, they want to be such and such. They want to have the most sophisticated product they put on the market, but they don't have the capability, they don't have the creativity, or they don't have the funds to be able to do that. So it's important for organizations to sit back today and define what is the strategy or what is the business priority that is so important to them, for them to achieve their purpose. Once they have established this, we ask them to look at their organizational capabilities in terms of structure, in terms of people, and see if they can, in reality, achieve these objectives that they want to achieve, that hopefully are aligned with their purpose. And if they cannot make that transformation at the organization capabilities level, they're unlikely to be able to reach their business objectives. We'll talk about that a little bit more without bothering you with the details. Now, students or professionals on the call may be thinking, well, what does that mean? How do you look for that? It's extremely important once an organization has defined where it wants to be in the market to run through a test of its capabilities, understanding where they are now and how they can bridge the gap between where they are now and to the future. There's purposely a lot of detail on this slide, so I'm hoping from that you can get a sense of what do you need to examine. Sit back and think of your organization today, where you work or where your ambition is to go and work, and think about how does that organization get itself into that turn and accelerate fast. It needs to know a lot about itself before you start the fixing. What kind of a culture? What do they believe in? What drives them? How much they empower their employees? How much they trust their employees and their leaders? What kind of attributes they look for? What are their aspirations? All these items you see at the bottom of the scale, of the chart, but you also got to look at the goals of the organization, the performance indicators. What do you have to do? How do you know that you're performing before you can really reach a certain performance level? The challenges, how do you adapt to the reality? A lot of things that we ask, and we sit with leaders of organizations today to think through. These one would say, well, these are kind of the softer side of an organization, but they're also harder sides of the organization. What's your structure like? If you want teamwork, are you designed to have teamwork? If you want teamwork, do you have a performance management system that values teamwork, or are you still evaluating the performance of individuals? These are the kind of tests or conversations we have with organizations to make sure that they are all aligned to what their business aspirations are or what their purpose is in life. Typically, a company invites us in, and this is not just to explain the process a little bit. This is not advertising. Companies invite us in to look at these things, and these are conversations we have with the leadership teams of these companies that oftentimes, take a full week of conversations, but also data, hard data that supports the arguments leadership of organizations make, and the pushback or the questioning that we put in front of them to make sure that they do understand their organization well, no matter how long they've been in it. But we want them to be able to understand their organization in the context we are in today, with two lights on that equation. One is the talent crunch, two is the COVID-19, which we know is a short term, hopefully in a year's time, we start coming out of that turn. So shaping the future of the workforce is extremely important. A lot of you have heard the terms, for example, like gig economy. I'm going to skip that slide and spend the time nicer on this one. When we think of a workforce of the future, we ask these 6 questions, and we hope that organizations can get them right. First of all, once again, on number 1, we talked about purpose, business priorities, strategy and business priorities, and then organizational capabilities to see whether they can achieve these goals. Now, we take a deeper look at the people element of the organization. Now, if you want to be what you say you want to be, or if you want to accelerate through the turn in a certain way, let's look at your workforce. And this is, again, a lot of hard analysis and a lot of discussions, views about the workforce. So you have the right source. Right source meaning, do you get your people from the right place? For example, if your workforce plan goes all the way to 2030, are you factoring India into your equation? Because this is where you're going to get surplus. If you're a company in Brazil today, and you know that you're going to have a severe deficit, what are you going about it? What are you really doing about it? Is Portugal, another Portuguese-speaking country, a good source for you? Or you take a different approach to your workforce and you add skills where you can probably work in different languages. Whatever the case is, having the right source for your talent, do you get them from competition? Do you buy another company so you can access resources you need? What skills do you need now? What skills do you need in the future, more importantly? How is your business transforming? And there is no crystal ball. I am always baffled at speakers, and I attend a lot of seminars, and I read quite a bit. I'm baffled at people that give us a recipe as to the profile of the future. I don't think anyone knows in 10 years how work is transforming. 10 years ago, for those of you listening to this, 10 years ago, you were barely buying anything online. Today, you're barely going to a store. And not only because of COVID-19. You're already making most of your purchases online. So technologies need new skills. New technologies need new skills to push them. The shape of the workforce is very important. How do you structure it? You really need team leaders, all these ratios people talk about, all this data we own, actually we have, and we sell to clients. Clients ask us, for example, well, how many people I should have under each manager? It doesn't matter anymore. I can give you data from the past, but you have to think about how do you want to structure your workforce in the future so you can achieve the objectives you want, how big you want it to be, where you want it to be, right size, meaning how big you want your workforce to be. Do you want to rely on employees, or do you want, we have a lot of clients now thinking very seriously about the gig economy, targeting 35%, one third of their workforce in contractors, freelancers that have passion for the work, and not people that will apply for a job, take a job, and sit in the organization for 10 years. This was my generation. I entered the workforce in 1989, where to a great extent, our dream was to get into a company and do a 20-year career. That was the model. Today, very few people want to do this, and companies, but we are pushing companies to start to think about the size of their workforce. I think in 2030, we will have less employees in companies. That's my crystal ball. Then we would have people, freelancers, doing the work. The right site. Where do you have your employees? You know, when again, even before COVID-19, a lot of companies were talking. We were one of those companies debating as to whether we want to still have office space in the best block downtown of every city we are in. It was hugely expensive, hugely inconvenient for a lot of our colleagues who live and work in different places. In some places like London, it became impossible for a lot of our people to live in London. And if we have people on this webinar from London, you know how much public transport costs and how much time it takes and how much of a hassle it is. We were already starting to think, well, what we probably need is small regional offices where people can probably even walk to their workplace without having the full service of the office as we know it today. Right site also means, I'll give you an example on this. There's a French company we're working with who wants to get out of their office on the most expensive avenue in Paris. And what they want is work spaces, they're not even calling them offices, around Paris, where for the most part, and they're polling their own population, for the most part, people will not walk more than 30 minutes to get to a place where they can work. They're funding people to work from home. They're funding enough so that people can go from a studio to a one-bedroom apartment and be more comfortable. So the right site is becoming a very important part of the equation of how you manage a workforce. But also the globalizing aspect of the workforce, the talent crunch, as I described it, will probably tell you that I'm going to have to hire, say, 100 people in India, but I'm not necessarily going to move them into Paris. I will organize the sites for my workforce in a very different way. COVID or no COVID. That's how it's going. The right spend is very important. I've done part of my career in compensation consulting, and I know that CFOs worry about how much they're going to have to spend on their workforce. So I think companies are going to get much more astute today on managing the cost of their workforce by offering packages that are different from what my generation and how my generation got paid. It's going to be more of a menu option, for example, or what they call cafeteria plans. My generation got into the workforce and we were told we were giving you a great insurance plan. So I look at the great insurance plan and there's really nothing in that insurance plan that means anything to me because I don't know, I don't have yet 2 children or a dog or what have you. So we were given things in that one uniform package that didn't mean anything for a certain age group, for a certain gender, and what have you. Companies are tailoring their compensation systems much more to the different parts of their demographics. And that in itself is this is when the whole talk about diversity and inclusion becomes real for companies, where they start putting actually their hand in their pocket or open their wallet, depending on which expression you prefer, and start really walking the talk on source of employees, skills of employees, shape of the workforce, size of the workforce, site and spend and the cost. And it can be, I mean, we are already dabbling with scenarios with a number of our clients where it can be a win-win situation. And I think I don't have the demographics of who's on this webinar, but I think this should be music to the new generation's ears. It's going to become much more tailor-made and more comfortable, not only so it attracts people into companies, but also for companies to be able to fill that gap of and the talent crunch and accelerate the right way when things get better. I'm going to spend probably I know I want to do another 5 minutes here before we jump to some Q&A. There's a lot to be done also on what some call the softer side of things and the people equation, but more importantly here, leadership. I'm always baffled when clients in a crisis like this thinks of its current leaders are the leaders to manage a crisis. Especially when you look at leaders and you know how they've gotten there. They've gotten there through, hard work, sweat, but in different conditions, and have performed and whatnot, but in different conditions. And very few companies, and we challenge our clients today to go and do an emergency succession review and check who can manage currently and who can manage when things start to improve. A lot of people are great leaders in different phases of an organization's life and different phases of an economy. But companies are, frankly, they're really chicken about making dramatic changes, even though they know they got to. Some of them don't have the heart. Some of them don't have the stomach to basically say, George, you've served us very well. You've been a great leader of the past when things were in these conditions. But today, Jane is the right leader because she has vision. She's more in touch with the newer generation. She can predict things better. She has more courage. She can make decisions without humongous levels of analytics. Whereas you are from the generation, and this is not only generational, this is also style, where you need so many data sets before you can make a decision. Jane can make that decision, and Jane is the leader of the future in our organization. We push our clients today to do this emergency succession review, but we also push them to make the changes. If they realize that George is not the right person, well, take out George honorably, but take out George and don't risk your company. And assign the best and the brightest to all pivotal and strategic challenges, campaigns, projects, engagements, whatever you call them. So the world of progressing over time to enter that leadership space is gone. And thankfully, it will take a while before we visibly take notice of it. But organizations know that they cannot, spend 10, 12 years to groom a leader. You got to look carefully. You got to look more frequently, and you got to look at all levels, all genders, all origins, or color, so on and so forth, and find the leaders or the to-be leaders and really push them to the next level. This is, to me, this is imperative, because that's how you know that you can claim the next phase in your business, accelerate through the turn, and come out strong. I think I've used the word I'm baffled, or the expression I'm baffled twice, or this is the third time I say it, because it just, we've been through this crisis for close to a year now. And some companies are still, or not some, I should say, a lot of companies, or most, have taken some actions, but they're actions at the surface. They've changed the policy about working from home. They changed the certain things, or they met 15 people on Zoom and they decided if people want to buy a big screen at home, we should allow them and we will fund it up to $100. Frankly, this is Mickey Mouse stuff. This is not what's going to get companies to come out of the problems and again claim a space in the next 10 years, knowing that there is a global talent crunch. I don't want to give you this is probably the last slide I want to use. I don't want to give you a recipe of, okay, I'm always asked, what's the competency framework? What's the competency model of the leader of the future? I wish we were at the time where we could start looking even at that in 5-year chunks. All I can offer is that what you need in leaders today, and what investors, whether it's private capital or bankers or shareholders in companies, what they really, really look into now for the next couple of 3 years is people that can succeed in the future. And what we offer today is that you really need people that can, at the very least, self-disrupt if they want to stay in leadership positions, or if they can earn a stay in a leadership position, radically change how they do things and continuously doing it. And if they can't, we go back to the slide before, companies have a business responsibility to their shareholders, and frankly, a moral responsibility to their employees to bring the right leaders into place. But we need leaders that can anticipate things, that can make judgment, create opportunities, not glorified managers. We need people that can drive things, energize people, give them purpose, keep them hopeful, keep them optimistic. People that can accelerate things, new ideas, innovation, daring to try new things and see what work, and leaders that can partner with others, whether inside their organization or outside. I mean, how many times companies suffered? I mean, there are so many case studies, even in my lifetime in the business, 32 years now doing this kind of work, where you see leaders take their department, their silo, and really kind of hug it like if it's their baby, and nobody gets in, nobody gets out. It becomes almost a prison. And then 2-3 years later, you have totally demotivated workforce because they're not partnering with anyone. They're not learning from others. A leader that cannot enable an exchange with the outside world. And again, when we talked about what site you want people to be in, you want a contingent workforce. But contingent workforce even has changed in definition. It used to be, again, my generation called it an extra pairs of arms and legs that can help you do your work. That's not what it is. This is the workforce you go to, and they may be working with you half a day a week or 2 days a week and doing other things. But these are the people you learn from. And a confident leader is a leader that can partner for that and, have enough, trust and perspective on things. I think I've consumed my 45 minutes here, and 44. So I'm on target. Jenny, you should be proud that I didn't mess it up. Thanks for your help. Last question. In your view, when it comes to people matters, your organization will do what? And if you're a student on this call, just think of whatever the last internship you did, that organization, or what you think, just simply. Any replies, Jenny? Huh. This is interesting. I get that statistic a lot, where the second one is about reaction. Most react to some important issues, but only make very minor changes. It's good that we only have a couple that basically said, well, you know, they rarely act. It's a shame. People who are in organizations like this, in my opinion, should seek different gigs in life. This is not surprising. The reaction to noise, the lack of rigorous thinking about what to do next. But again, that's why you exist. That's why we exist, to help push the envelope a little bit with clients. I'm gonna shut up now, and we open it for some Q&As. Jenny, is this okay?
Yes. Thank you for your great presentation, George. So I would like to ask you a question first. So people might think that skilled labor is increasing because many people are well educated compared to the past, but the result of the study was the opposite. So what's the meaning of skilled labor that governments or organizations define now? Who is skilled labor?
I wish I knew the statistics on the call, because in some countries, skilled labor means the people with a pick and shovel digging trenches. And that's certainly not what we mean. These are the people with at least in the US would translate into 4-year college education, a bachelor's degree or better. What we are seeing, you're absolutely right. And where I work, I didn't mention where I am. I'm actually sitting in Dubai, and we work a lot with the Saudi government on a very ambitious transformation agenda, where the country wants to become diversified. It's an oil reliant economy that, with the demand on oil decreasing by the year, and decreasing massively by 2040, they're basically, what kind of new industries we want to bring in. So you look at Saudi Arabia, and what you find is you can pick chemical and oil and gas engineers, maybe a dime a dozen. I'm simplifying. We're having a conversation here. There's just so many of them, in an economy where reliance on oil is declining, where their price point has dropped because there has been so much supply of these highly educated engineers from very good schools. But again, I don't want to be insulting, but they become kind of useless with the progression of work. So that is the message about why is it that there's a shortage. It's not a shortage of number of people with education. One of the reasons why, two reasons why India will be in a much better position, because India has deliberately focused on, well, English is in a curriculum, but also math, science, technology that are extremely fungible or transferable in the jobs of the future, but can also lead, if you think a little bit of the new the innovations in technology, a lot of them came from people with that kind of background. So of course it takes everything, but it has to be a little bit more planned as to how do you get to a future where we don't only have people with a lot of degrees and higher education that cannot add value to the economy. That's why I said on one of my slides, it's not a question of numbers only, it's a question of the right skills. And it's extremely hard to predict the skills that you need in 10 years, which that's why you see in a lot of universities a huge spike in continuing education. You can't graduate today. Bad news, perhaps, for people listening to this who are graduating now and thinking, I'm out of here for a while. You're not going to be out of here for a while. And that's what I mean by that. Sorry, I took too long for the answer. Other questions?
Yep. Another question is about issues about identifying young talents and the transition from old generations to young generations in the workplace. So our attendees feel that older generations have a hard time delegating leadership responsibilities to young generations. So even if they bring more to the table, to be honest. So what do you recommend, and how do you identify young talents for leadership roles?
First of all, I agree with whoever said that older people. Look, I'm turning 57, so I'm in that category. Older people have a tougher time delegating to younger ones, because we grew up in yesteryears in management setups, frameworks, where we said, well, experience only matters. I totally believe that experience matters, but you cannot have experience only. You have to have experience, because experience may bring, wisdom and how you approach something, or brings a perspective, or will allow you or teach you how to kind of step back and perhaps not take action, wait for things to resolve themselves, or whatever experience brings. But experience alone is not sufficient. Now, new skills that the younger generations bring also alone are not sufficient. So it goes back to leaders today that have, like I said, a moral and a business obligation to look for succession. You got to be a secure person to look for succession. I have 3 successors that I'm grooming and coaching. One of them is going to succeed me. But in a company, in a consulting firm, that's a must. I don't have a choice. I cannot sit and say, well, no, I'm not going to, or I don't want to do that, because I put the whole business at risk. We're a $2 billion business. If I don't have a successor, it's criminal, because you can have 3,000 people without work if I let this go. So leaders of the past, or the older generation, needs to understand their moral and their business obligation. And in a practical sense, conduct these talent reviews that companies do. Most companies use some technique called the 9-box exercise, where they think of people based on performance and potential, and they mess it up because they keep finding the ones with performance and not necessarily focusing on the ones with potential. So doing a thorough talent review to be able to identify the younger generation that will become a successor. And you can't only think successor as successor to one person. It's a successor to the business. It's business continuity. But the conversation, I mean, this is where I sometimes get a little bit ticked off, frankly, because you get somebody from, respectfully, I worked in human resources all my life. Somebody from human resources that comes to facilitate the session with the so-called the business, like if human resources is not part of the business, and a lot of times they're weak. They're not strong enough to ask the right questions and to push business leaders to identify the next generation. And once identified, mentor them, coach them, assess them every couple of years to see if some of these skills you wanted to gain over time are being gained. But at the same time, do the same for the leaders, and make sure that the leaders that aren't serving you a good purpose anymore move on. There's a lot at stake.
Thank you for your answer. And the next question is, what themes are you seeing in how organizations approach changing organizational culture and individual mindsets in the current and emerging environment?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I like that when we talk about culture change, because people think of culture as, well, these are the soft things in an organization. A lot of our clients say, well, you know, we got to take care of the softer things. Actually, yeah, if you want to call culture soft, the soft thing, call it the soft. But actually, in reality, it's the hardest thing to change. Most companies fail at changing the culture at the speed they want, because it takes 2 elements. most, if not all, of the failing culture change agendas are based on training and kind of brainwashing type. Brainwashing, again, I'm simplifying. But they put their workforce through some sort of sessions online in groups. They play some games, they cut cardboard, they build a car, or they weave a carpet, or whatever they do to kind of basically signal to them, well, we need to work in teams, and this is good. This is good activity. But this is not going to change your culture. This just gives hints, and then everybody goes back an hour later to their job, and they do things 99% the same way. Next time you do it, it becomes 95% or 92%, but you're not going to really achieve a major culture change. Culture change, going back to one of the slides I used about defining your purpose as an organization, is so darn important. What purpose do you serve? Do you, I don't know, do you want to be the provider of clean energy and that's what you're obsessive about? Then you build your culture around it. So basically, you don't know what your purpose is. You want to measure, if you're not a startup, and startups always have an advantage, you can start building it the way you want. Most companies aren't startups. So you want to run the tests, and I could have shown something here about it. You have to run a rigorous test in the firm and the company as to what culture do you aspire to be able to achieve your purpose, and what culture do you have today? We have tools that help our clients do that. And it's interesting how big the gap is between what organizations want and what organizations have. And for each one of these attributes, I mean, we use a technology that presents 52 organizational attributes, where we ask our clients to rank order them in a pyramidal shape. So we want them to tell us which one is so important to you. And at the far right of the pyramid, there's only one answer. At the far left, the one answer, typically a pyramidal shape, where we say, tell us what's so important and what's kind of in the middle. The things you want to do more of culturally, or the things you want to do less of culturally, and whatever fits in the middle. And we measure the R square. We measure also how much of a consensus there is amongst people that replied as to where they are today and where they want to be. If there's enough consensus, then we start working with the sides of the pyramid. The attributes, let's say, I'm going to go back to the simple example of working in teams. If the culture you want is a culture of working in teams, we look at your performance management system, it may need to be totally overhauled so you can value work culture. Most companies tell us we value innovation. We want a culture of innovation. And gosh, if some poor employee makes a mistake, they beat him over the head with a 2x4. So that needs to, there needs to be some measurement of the gap before you can start tweaking with the organization to align aspiration or to bring current to the aspiration.
Thank you for sharing your opinions. So due to the time limit, this will be the last question. So you shared important elements and facts on the current situation. So how do you influence decision makers to learn from and act on these very important elements that will shape our future?
Look, this is an excellent question. I wish we had a lot more time for it. We influence people, we influence leaders by virtue of what we do. I mean, frankly, we get paid by them to influence them. So we're starting from a good, I mean, consulting firms start from a good place because people are predisposed to wanting to listen to an opinion, hear war stories. What I find to be the biggest influencer is what we used to call benchmark analysis, where we can tell a client, a bank, for example, what other banks have done to be able to achieve a certain shift. Most of the time, well, not most of the time, I wish that most of the time you have champions inside the organization that can influence the rest of the organization. Sometimes it comes from the top leader, where he or she are influential enough, can rally the troops and take them on a journey. But what we also tell leaders who want to take it upon themselves to influence others for change is to, frankly, clean up some of the weeds, because sometimes you have enough in the organization that will stop you from being able to move. So like most change agendas, you're going to have three groups: the people that will rally around the agenda, the people that will fight it, even the American Revolution was like that, and the people that will sit in the middle, the fence sitters. So you want to influence the fence sitters. Don't waste time on the people that aren't going to move one standard deviation to the right. So you get people that you can that will be influenced, that are self-influenceable towards the future. Focus on the fence sitters. Then you have 2/3 moving in the right direction. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, George, for sharing your knowledge, expertise, and wisdom with us today. If we didn't get to your question, please feel free to send us an email, which you can find on your screen here. On behalf of the OD&C program, we hope that you found this webinar helpful. Registrations for all other events can be found on our social media platforms, and please feel free to visit our website on the screen or email us with any additional questions. Thank you for attending today, and we hope to have you back on December 18th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, please feel free to share our webinar series with your networks and social media platforms, as all are invited and welcome. Thank you so much, George.
Thank you.